In this episode of Locked On Capitals, I have the very latest on Ivan Miroshnichenko. Then we'll talk about Hendrix Lapierre and how he's progressing at MedStar Ice Complex. And then one former Capital hangs up his skates for the last time. We'll talk about all of that and more next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen or view of the day. Yes, this podcast is also available in video form, so head on over to YouTube and check it out. And when you're on YouTube, make sure and hit that subscribe button. And if you like the videos, give it a thumbs up. It really helps grow the channel. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in this edition, we're going to start off by talking about Ivan Miroshnichenko and what his plans are for the future. He was drafted this last season, and this story is in Washington Hockey Now. They talk about the Washington Capitals believe they got a steal in the 2022 NHL draft in Ivan Miroshnichenko, and they are seeing the Russian make progress over in Russia as he aims to return to play this season following a Hodgkin's lymphoma diagnosis last year. And he was kind of one of the players that I was surprised that they drafted him. For one, I was not aware of him. I had never heard of him before the Capitals drafted him. But everything that I'm hearing about Ivan is that if it had not been, if he'd never had Hodgkin's lymphoma, he would have even been drafted higher. And that the Capitals medical staff, took a look at his medical history and, where he is at in the stage of his recovery from this disease. And they signed off on him that they think that he is trending in the right direction, and they see a really big upside on him. So I think that the Capitals made a good decision. I don't think that they just go willy-nilly out there and just throw contracts, or draft players for no apparent reason. They obviously vetted him, and they saw a player that they wanted. Assistant General Manager Ross Mahoney shared an update on the 18-year-old who is overseas and making strides as he awaits for the green light to join his team in 2022-23. He's progressing. I mean, he's skating. He's working out, Mahoney said. He's not with his KHL team right now. He has to kind of wait for a medical clearance from the league. He's been cleared by doctors to go to work out and those sort of things, but it's more of a league thing where he's just waiting to get clearance. And in this situation, I think that he should kind of proceed with caution. I know that he's probably itching to get out there and prove to everyone that I am ready. I'm ready to make my big jump. But I think that, it would be wise for him to just kind of take his time and follow the direction of the league and, kind of just do everything in step. You don't need to rush into anything. The Capitals expect Miroshnichenko to play this season. He will not be at training camp, but was at development camp for off-season sessions in July and was cleared for on-ice work after going into remission. Not only has he returned to skating, but he has also been working out off the ice to add strength back. His father has been coaching him. Miroshnichenko was in North America for off-season sessions at Washington's development camp, and everything that I've heard is that he is progressing very well, and he's not, like the article talked about there in Washington Hockey Now, he is not going to make it on the team this year, but the progression in his trajectory is in the right direction. So I think that, a few years from now, you have a really solid player, another great Russian on the team, and I look forward to what he brings to this Capitals team. And overall, Washington has liked what they've seen with regard to his recovery and progress. It was a pretty serious thing that he went through, and he's on the right road to recovery and stronger, Mahoney said. Like I said, he's working off ice and on ice. Mahoney also said that Miro's resilience truly speaks to his overall character and leadership. He was always the captain of his under 17 and under 18 team. And even the tournament last November with the under 20, he was the assistant captain, probably an indicator of his character. I remember seeing him in under 18 world champions in Germany. He was there to do another round of chemo. He had no hair. His blue jeans looked like they were just sort of hanging on his hips. Didn't look good at all. And I talked to him there. Mahoney said, we obviously interviewed him after and then interviewed him at the draft. I think he's a really strong character. He went through an awful lot, but I think it speaks volumes of his character and the type of person that he is. And, if you think about it, that was a major illness for him to go through. And, there's probably a lot of people and or players out there that would probably just say, you know what, I tried, but, this major health issue that I'm facing is just too much for me. I'm going to put hockey on pause, but not Ivan. He has shown great resilience. And like Ross Mahoney said there, it looks like the arrow's pointing up for him. I think that, if he just, once he gets that league clearance to start playing again, I think that he can continue to develop his game. And, that's what I'm talking about. I think that the future is bright for him. You take a look at this Capitals roster. It is an aging roster. And, Ovechkin has like 4 years left on this team. And after that, a lot of these younger players are going to have to start to integrate into this team because that is the next batch of Capitals players out there. And I think that Ivan does play a role on this team. And, I guess it just remains to be seen when exactly he will play for the Washington Capitals on the big team. But I think that his trajectory is going in the right direction. All right, so after the break here, we're going to continue to talk about the Capitals and what's going on at MedStar Ice Complex. And then one former Capital hangs up his skates one last time. We'll talk about that next. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your pro and college football betting needs and sports info this season. Find all of the latest football league developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts, including this year's opening week's games. BetOnline is also your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. And now that the NFL season is going in full swing, Bet Online makes it that much more fun to watch the games. So go to Bet Online where the game starts. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, where it's your team every day. In this episode, what we're going to talk about next is one former Capital, Zdeno Chara, hangs up his skates one last time. Zdeno Chara, who spent a large chunk of his career playing with the Bruins, also spent some time with the Islanders, decided to hang it up. And, I will always remember him as a great player for the brief time he was with the Capitals. He was one of those guys that was definitely team tough. If you're going to take on one of my guys, you're going to take on me as well. And I think that Zdeno Chara, he is getting a bit older like everyone is, and thought it was a good time to finally hang up the skates. This story was in Washington Hockey Now. They were saying longtime Boston Bruins captain and former Washington Capitals defenseman Zdeno Chara is calling it a career. Chara announced on Instagram on Tuesday that he is hanging up the skates after 24 seasons in the NHL to close out his NHL career, which consisted of nearly 2,000 regular season and playoff games. He signed a one-day contract with the Boston Bruins to retire as a member of the Bruins. And he, was a great player for that Boston Bruins team. He played for them for so many years. So, for the Boston Bruins to kind of give a tip of their hat and acknowledge him and allow him to sign that one-day contract to retire as a Boston Bruin, I think was just, a really cool gesture on their part. After 25 seasons of professional hockey, 1,688 80 NHL regular season games, 200 Stanley Cup playoff games, and hundreds of international games, I am proud to announce my decision to retire from the National Hockey League. Chara wrote, I'm doing so. I am honored to return to TD Garden today and sign a one-day contract with the Boston Bruins and officially finish my career with a team that has meant so much to me and my family. There are so many people that have helped me and contribute to my success, including all of you, and I look forward to properly thanking every one of you this afternoon. Thank you, Big Z, and just a class act. And if you look at Zdeno Chara, you kind of look at him and think, well, he's just a goon out there. I mean, he kind of looks a little bit rough and tough out there, but when you listen to him actually speak in post-game interviews and stuff, he actually is quite a good speaker. So, when they say you can't always judge a book by its cover, that is true with Zdeno Chara as well. The 6'9", 250-pound blue liner started his career with the New York Islanders, who took him in third in the 1996 NHL draft. He spent 5 years on the island before being traded to the Ottawa Senators. Following 4 years in Ottawa, he hit free agency in 2006 and signed with Boston, where he thrived as one of the league's top defensemen while also leading the Bruins to new heights. He helped the team win the Stanley Cup in 2011 and helped Boston reach the Stanley Cup 3 times in the 2010s. After 1,023 games with the Bruins, Chara hit the market again in 2020 and signed a one-year contract with the Capitals. Despite his one-year tenure in Washington, he had a major impact on the club as a vocal leader and a strong locker room presence. In 55 games with the Capitals, Chara had 2 goals and 8 assists, 67 blocks, and 88 hits. And he wasn't necessarily lighting up the stat chart out there, but I think that he kind of brought some of those intangibles to the team, like they were talking about a leadership role. Some of the younger defensemen and some of the older defensemen and just players in general on the Capitals, I think, learned a lot from him. He was a guy that had been in the league for so many years that, you don't get to be in the NHL for that many years by being a poor player. So obviously, many of the Capitals, and, they kind of resounded that as much, learned a lot from Zdeno Chara with his time on the team. It was a new experience for me. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, since day one, everybody welcomed me with open arms, and all credit goes to the coaching staff, trainers, and my teammates, Chara said of his time in the district. They did an amazing job welcoming me and making that transition as easy as possible, and I really enjoyed it. It was a great time spent here and a lot of fun. We played some great hockey, and there was some great hockey there, and, a guy like Martin Faravari kind of had to put his career on hold when they signed Zdeno Chara because he was kind of penciled in to fill that role. Faravari has since gone on and is continuing to be a great player for the Capitals. Zdeno Chara goes on to say, "I felt great. It was obviously a condensed season with a lot of games, travel itineraries, and practices, but I thought the coaching staff, all of the trainers managed it really well." Chara said, "They spread the workloads and rest days between our games and practices the way that we would rest and be fresh. I had a lot of fun. I obviously love to stay in shape and work out, and that's what I did. What we did, it was a lot of fun." He went on to play one more NHL season with the Islanders and 72 games in the 21-22 season. The 45-year-old collected 2 goals, 12 assists, 90 blocks, and 125 hits. So, you did kind of start to see a bit of decline in Zdeno Chara as, he was getting older. You saw that production kind of slow down a little bit, but, that was to be expected. But when you look over the totality of Zdeno Chara's career, you're going to look at him and say he was one solid defenseman. And if you're a Boston Bruins fan, I don't think that there's any doubt out there the great impact that he had on that Bruins team. The Bruins went on to win a Stanley Cup and they went into the playoffs, and that was done on the back in large part of Zdeno Chara and just, the great impact. He was an intimidator out there, and he wasn't, afraid to mix up with anyone out there. He got into skirmishes with Tom Wilson and Alex Ovechkin over the years, but, just a real tall, tough guy out there that, you better pack a lunch if you want to take on Zdeno Chara, because if you wanted to fight, you got it. And he would give you all that you could handle. And Zdeno Chara, kind of an enforcer on the Bruins and, the Capitals and, just in general, the teams that he he played on. So his impact in the league with Boston and Washington and the Islanders and the Senators, it's something that cannot be overlooked. And I think that all of those teams should give a real great tip of their hat to just one outstanding player in Zdeno Chara. In 1,680 regular season games, Chara dished 209 goals, 471 assists, 1,493 blocks, and 2,022 hits, as well as one career hat trick. He appeared in 6 All-Star games and won the Norris in 2009 and the Mark Messier Leadership Award in 2011. He finished his career 7th most played games played by a player in NHL history. So, like I'm saying, you don't get to be in the league, in the National Hockey League, for that long, by being a poor player. So, like I say, everyone in the NHL, it's a great moment to kind of give a tip of your hat to one great Zdeno Chara. Like I say, these guys, they're not a dime a dozen, and Zdeno Chara will go down in history as being one of the greats. All right, so after the break here, we're going to talk a little bit about Hendrix Lapierre, and then we're going to talk about some of the top prospects in the Capitals organization. We'll talk about that next. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, where it's your team every day. In this episode, in this final segment here, we're going to talk a little bit about Hendrix Lapierre and how things are going for him. He is one of the crown jewels in the Washington Capitals organization as far as prospects and futures. Hendrix did have a brief stint with the Washington Capitals this last season. In the beginning of the season, he then went on to play in juniors. As I'm going to talk about, and we'll see in this article here, he does have a lot of confidence. He has a lot of swagger. He thinks that he has what it takes to crack this Washington Capitals team. Hendrix says his goal is to crack the Capitals roster out of training camp. He added 7 to 8 pounds of smart weight this offseason and poured over videos of players like Patrice Bergeron, Elias Lindholm, and Sebastian Aho. They're guys that I try, to mimic on the ice. And those are some great guys to mimic or look after. But one of the things that I had heard about Hendrix Lapierre is they talked about it and they said, kind of pump the brakes here a little bit on your weightlifting. You don't want to get to be too jacked out there. And I think that he added that smart weight out there. He says, you can't arrive at camp and not have the mentality of making the team. Lapierre said, you got to be confident, a confident player. And I've said before, I think I've put myself in the situation to have success with what I've done this summer. And I think that Hendrix is doing a lot of the right things. He's adding on a lot of that muscle mass out there to be a tough guy. So it's not so easy to push him off the puck. It's been in and out of my head ever since I got eliminated last year from the QMJHL, and it's still in my head. It's go time. And like I said, I'll be ready whatever happens, but I don't want to have any regrets, kind of like last year, and just play my game and see what happens. And, like I was talking about with JJ Regan last season, there are not a lot of positions available. Most of the positions on the Washington Capitals have been penciled in. Brian McClellan went out in the offseason and solidified the different positions of need by signing Dylan Strome and Connor Brown and Gustafsson and Darcy Kemper and Charlie Lindgren, et cetera, out there. So in order for a player like Hendrix Lapierre, he is going to, I hate to say it, hope for injury or hope that another one of the players out there is having a poor performance out there and that maybe he can get inserted into the lineup. It's a long season and there's always things like injury and poor performance. And I hate to say it, possibly a COVID flare up in the fall. I think that anything is possible, but that's what he's hoping for because he's going to have to kind of fight his way into, there's other players, younger players that want to get in there as well. Talk about Connor McMichael. So I think for a lot of these younger guys, if I would give them any advice or, any pointers, I would say, be patient. It might not necessarily happen this season. There's a good chance that Hendrix Lapierre and Connor McMichael may not crack the big team this year. And that's okay. I think that the arrow's pointing up and, when they get that brief opportunity to play on the team, they have to really shine. And they've done that. They've put in the work at MedStar Ice Complex. Hendrix Lapierre, like I was talking about there, and just have that confidence that I belong here. Sometimes humble pie is what the doctor ordered, but sometimes to eat a little bit of swagger is a good thing too. And just to really exude that confidence that, guys, I belong here. And you can't really diminish who Hendrix Lapierre is. He's a great player. He's a young player. Sometimes you can really shine in the juniors, and, let's see what he has potentially in Hershey this year. But his time is coming, and that is the future of this Washington Capitals team. I hate to say it, bring it up again, but like I talked about with JJ yesterday, this is an aging roster, and this rock the red era, I put in quotes, is getting older. So in coming years, it is going to be time for your Hendrix Lapierre, your Connor McMichael, your Lucas Johansen, Alexiev, etc. And just being patient and biding your time is the most important thing here. So this was an article in the Athletic, and they were talking about, and I'm going to go over it briefly here, the 10 prospects in the Capitals organization to look out for. And one of them, number one, was Hendrix Lapierre. The 2020 first rounder means business. He came to town several weeks early to participate in the informal veteran skates. And during just completed 4-day rookie camp, he has looked like the top prospect that he is against players his own age. And that's what I'm talking about. A standout player, putting in the extra work. Everyone in the Capitals organization is noticing that. They're noticing that you're showing up early to camp, and that's a good thing for you. Lapierre's reach goal is to earn a spot in the Caps opening night lineup, and after making the cut last October, why not? The reality of the situation, though, is that Washington, when fully healthy, goes Evgeny Kuznetsov, Dylan Strome, Lars Eller, and Nick Dowd down the middle, with an injured Nick Backstrom hoping to return at some point. Can Lapierre force GM Brian McClellan's hand? Perhaps, but it's more likely he'll start the season in AHL Hershey, where he can play top 6 minutes and on special teams. A season with the Bears didn't hurt McMichael. It won't hurt Lapierre. That is Tarek El-Bashir's assessment, and I agree with Tarek in that regard. One of the worst things that can happen is, like they were talking about, it is a crowded lineup for the Capitals. You don't want to spend your time as a healthy scratch, because that can kind of stop your development if you're spending the time as a healthy scratch up in the press box. I always will remember what Braden Holtby said about the AHL. It is a razor fine line. It's not like there's a big disparity between the NHL and the AHL. As you make your progression from the juniors to the ECHL, the AHL, etc., as you work your way up, those players are getting better, and the AHL is a really good opportunity for you to learn a lot and to get some excellent playing time. So what they're saying, he's going into camp on a mission to make the Caps, and that's the mindset you want your top prospects to have. We'll just have to see how things play out through camp in the beginning of the season. I feel like as an organization, we've done a good job of putting our young players in the right position for their development, and that's what will ultimately guide our decision with him. Whatever situation he gets put in, we'll have to ask ourselves, is this the best decision for his development now? Because he looks like he's going to be a very important player for us in the future. So we want to make sure we bring him along the right way. The question will get answered in training camp. And that is what I have talked about on this podcast all summer long, is that I think that this training camp this fall is going to be a proving ground like no other. Everyone like Dylan Strome and Connor Brown and all these guys think, I'm sitting back here and I know where I fit into this lineup. Connor Brown's thinking I'm top line right wing. Dylan Strome, I'm second line center. I'm going to tell you something out there. A lot of these younger guys like Hendrix Lapierre and Connor McMichael are hungry. And, you're not dealing with some, poor talent here. Hendrix Lapierre and Connor McMichael were top draft picks. So they have the skill set. They just got to work on fine-tuning their game. And I think that they're going to battle for a lot of these positions. And, I think that even if, they don't bump one of these guys out of the position, I do think that just with injury and everything else that's associated with the season, I do think that they will find a role. Then, of course, I talk about Ivan Miroshnichenko, another guy, left wing. I do think he has a bright outlook for this Capitals. I know that that Hodgkin's lymphoma has set him back, but, give him another opportunity. I think he has 1 year left on his contract with Russia. Let's see what he has out there. And, then you can kind of progress from there. So what they're saying about them is he should end up playing for the KHL, but right now they are still making sure that he's ready to play because of what he's gone through. He's getting healthier and he's been skating, but I don't know if he's had final clearance to be able to play. Like I talked about earlier, his dad is coaching him. So I think that the development in the KHL is going to be paramount in his development. And I do see a bright outlook for him. Number 3 is Alexi Protas, center. Of course, we saw him last year, and he is progressing well. And I do think that he's another one. That is the future. All these players that I'm talking about, these are the guys that are going to be your future Capitals. Just be patient. So what they're saying about him is it's time for him to take the next step and establish himself as one of the key young forwards on our team. He's just got to stick with the development plan. If he's in Washington or he's in Hershey, he has to understand there's a plan in place, that there's a process in place, and our goal is to make him the best player for the Caps, not just for this year, but for several years in the future, ideally. The next one is Vincent Ayaro. He is a defenseman. And he's another one that you hear a lot about and playing down at MedStar Ice Complex. What they're saying about him, he's another high-energy guy, good two-way defenseman, good penalty killer, makes a good first pass. He's worked really hard this offseason, too. He looks a lot stronger. He's starting to turn into a man. And, playing with these big guys, eventually he's going to be playing with Alex Ovechkin and some of the best in the league. That will mature you and that will progress your development in a hurry. Number 5 is a player that's no stranger to this team, Lucas Johansen. He just has to wait for his time. He's often bit by the injury bug, but I think he is going to have an opportunity this season, along with Alexiev, when he comes back from that shoulder surgery that he is healing from. And I do think that, this is going to be an opportunity for him this season. So what they're saying about him, he's got a really good opportunity and he realizes he has a really good opportunity. He just has to be the strongest professional. And we're really interested to see what he backs it up with. We need to get him some games, get in some playing and see how he does. We kind of see what he has in Hershey. Let's see what he does on the big stage in a very limited role. He's played okay, just not a lot to gauge him on. And one of the biggest drafts that they picked in this last draft was Ryan Chesley. They got him by trading Vitek Vanacek to the Devils, and I'm excited about Chesley. I think that he is going to be big in years to come for the Capitals. What they're saying about him is that I'm a big fan of Ryan's. I mean, there's not a lot to like about him. He's a good kid. He's got good character and can really skate. He scored more goals than the defenseman in history of the under 17 and under 18 program. Even though he has never played on the power play, he was more in a penalty killing role and accepted that role to do those things. The skating, the shot, the strength, the character. I'm excited about where he'll be in a few years, says Ross Mahoney. So he is not going to be talent that is going to be on the Capitals next season, but in years to come, a great pickup by drafting Ryan Chesley. I think that was a great move. Then, of course, Brett Leeson, right wing. What they're saying, if things did not go our way in free agency and the trade market, you might have had him penciled in your top 12 in Washington. He's shown himself to be a pretty useful guy at the NHL level already, just because Peter Laviolette knows what he's going to get when he puts him out on the ice. And that is a great ringing endorsement from Peter Laviolette. As you know, he usually prefers to go with more of the seasoned players out there. So that is just some of the top picks that The Athletic talked about in the Washington Capitals organization. And like I've talked about, these are not players that are, all of them going to be on the Capitals this coming season, but in years to come, these are the players to look up for. These are the future Washington Capitals out there. And, I do think that the future is bright. Thank you for making Locked On Capitals your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NHL. Locked On experts give you a daily 30-minute podcast on all things NHL all year long. Stay up to date on everything in the hockey world. Locked On NHL, your daily 30-minute NHL podcast. So once again, thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, where it's your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.